Good afternoon, Bermuda, and good afternoon to the members of the media. Today, I am joined by the Minister of Finance, the Honorable Curtis L. Dickinson, who has delivered the government's budget last week, Friday. I will hand over the press conference to him, who will give an overview of the budget matters for the questions today, and then I will, following the Minister of Finance, touch on the matters that are relating to the Cabinet Office and the departments under my charge. First, we'll hear from the Minister of Finance today. Minister?
Thanks, Premier. Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us here today. Last Friday, I delivered the budget statement for fiscal year 2021-22. This is a budget that is pragmatic, recognizes the times that we are operating in, is transparent, and designed to best position Bermuda for the future as we recover from the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. This budget seeks to address the serious issues facing our country with the overall aims of taking care of our people, diversifying our economy, growing our workforce, and improving our fiscal situation with a target of a balanced budget by fiscal 23-24, and consequently reducing our national debt. For fiscal 2020-2021, the government's financial performance has been severely impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, a pandemic that has had a significant impact on economies around the world. This government took vital steps to address the serious threats to safety and the welfare of our residents, and is estimated to have spent $127.2 million in unbudgeted COVID-19 related expenses, including unemployment benefits of approximately $56 million to 10,000 workers, PP&E, testing, quarantine facilities, and vaccination services, embodiment of the Royal Bermuda Regiment, enhanced cleaning contracts, funding for the BEDC Business Sustainability and Continuity Funding Program, and honoring the Airport Minimum Revenue Guarantee with Skyport. The COVID-19 pandemic impacted almost all of the government's revenue sources, with the primary impacts being lower payroll tax receipts, lower customs duty, and the loss of most tourism-related taxes and levies. The headline numbers for the 2021-22 national budget are a revenue target of $998.9 million, total spending of $1.124 billion, which includes current expenditure, excluding debt service, of $903 million, debt service of $127.8 million, capital expenditures of $92.9 million, and a projected deficit of $124.7 million. Given the sustained impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, the revenue estimates for 2021-22, as I said, is $998.9 million, $123.3 million, or 11% lower than the original estimate for the prior year, and $38.3 million, or 4% higher than the revised budget for 2020-2021. The most significant decreases will be in relation to the continued impact of COVID-19 on the global economy through the lack of cruise and air travel, and some softness in customs duties and payroll taxes. In support of those who have been adversely affected by the pandemic, the government will continue providing the following concessions that will impact revenue, but provide continued support to certain sectors of our economy. These include payroll tax relief to troubled sectors, which will continue through the 31st of March of 2022, the Tax Incentives to Grow Job program, which will be continued through March 31st of 2022, the Retail Shop Temporary Customs Duty Relief Act of 2008, which provides zero rate of customs duty on imported capital goods intended for renovations and refurbishment of retail stores, and that'll be extended for a further 5 years until the 31st of March of 2026. And then the 2015 land valuation list will remain in force for a further 10 years, and as such, there will be no increases in land tax, and the bans will remain as is. In an effort to further strengthen the regulatory oversight undertaken by the Registrar of Companies, and to support the digitization of functions of the ROC to meet changing international obligations and increase efficiency, there will be increases within the fee structure of the ROC, which will take effect at some point over the course of the fiscal year. There are no other meaningful increases to the costs of government services or additional fees and taxes. The national budget allocates $1.124 billion in total spending. This level of spending represents an $18.6 million or 1.6% decrease over the 2020-2021 original estimates, and an $82.7 million or 6.9% decrease over the 2020-21 revised estimate. Normal operating expenses are expected to be 5.3% lower than the original budget, accomplished by initiatives such as a freeze on the funding of vacant posts, a ban on non-essential government travel, reductions in discretionary spending, and temporary payroll or government employee overhead savings. The current account balance after interest is budgeted at a deficit of $31.9 million. This represents a decrease in the current account surplus of $97.1 million compared with the 2020-2021 budget, but a $142.5 million improvement over the revised budget estimate for 2020-2021. The government's capital expenditure plan is a combination of maintenance, remediation, and new works intended to preserve the integrity of the government estate, encourage infrastructure improvement, and to provide a measured economic stimulus in times like these. The capital plan for fiscal 2021-22 is set at $92.9 million and will achieve these broad intentions, playing a vital role in our economic recovery. The highlights of the plan include the development of a shoreside facility to support a new fishing cooperative, renewed grants to community clubs and community organizations, desperately needed upgrades to the Fiscal plant at the Mid-Atlantic Wellness Institute, consistent with the government's approach to the importance of mental health, and long-awaited upgrades to the Marine and Ports Workshop and the Department of Public Transportation's headquarters, both of which addresses long-standing concerns around worker safety and working conditions. Given the above, the government plans to run a budget deficit of $124.7 million in 2021-22, which is $120.8 million less than the revised estimate of $245.5 million for this fiscal year. The government has no plans to borrow in order to finance this fiscal year's deficit. Instead, as I have previously advised, the deficit will be financed using a portion of the proceeds raised in our August 2020 financing that has been deposited into the sinking fund. As of the 31st of March 2022, it is estimated that gross public debt will remain at the same level as at the 31st of March 2021 at $3.35 billion, and debt net of the sinking fund will be $3.2 billion. As I mentioned during the course of the budget statement, the government has developed an economic recovery plan. The economic recovery plan has been a whole-of-government effort and includes the inputs of key stakeholders, including the Economic Advisory Committee, the Financial Policy Council, and the Fiscal Responsibility Panel. We will be releasing more details on the plan in the coming weeks. The development of the plan has been guided by 6 key principles: combating COVID-19 as a priority, reducing the cost of living, fairness and equity, financial viability, fiscal prudence, and timeliness. We will execute this plan mindful of 2 key commitments. First, that Bermuda will return to a balanced budget in 3 fiscal years once tourism has fully recovered from the pandemic. And second, that Bermuda will maintain the current ceiling on total government debt. As I said last Friday, this is not a time to be timid. This is a time to be bold. I believe the challenges we face are solvable, and we can successfully execute our economic recovery plan and build an economy that all can participate in, an economy that works for all of us. I'd like to thank the Ministry of Finance team for their stellar work in putting together this budget during an incredibly difficult time. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of Finance. Certainly, the uniqueness of the times in which we live cannot be overstated. We are witnessing a paradigm shift in the world's way of life. Against that backdrop, Bermuda is preparing to embark on a path to economic recovery that is characterized by incredible opportunities. Let me begin by recognizing the considerable work and leadership of the Minister of Finance and the team of the Ministry of Finance. Setting expenditure targets, providing funding to meet our throne speech promises, and inspiring ongoing fiscal discipline is not easy in the best of times, and there's no question that these are not the best of times. However, this budget connects our throne speech promises to execution and delivery, providing the means by which we can meet the needs of people we serve. This budget will promote economic activity and growth to ensure that critical initiatives can be delivered. The impact of the pandemic on the local economy has been felt across almost every sector. Where businesses were unable to transition employees to remote working as a means by which to keep operations going, the impact has been the hardest. The tourism sector, restaurants and bars have tried to weather the economic storm and will continue to need our help in the near term. This budget provides them with that assistance by extending relief that has been targeted to those sectors. The National Economic Report speaks to the scale of the challenge. A decline of 1,935 posts in 2020 when compared to 2019, a 5.6% decrease. And when laid-off employees are included into that figure, preliminary data suggests 2,924 less positions in Bermuda, a decline of 8.5%. That is the full and total impact of the pandemic. But as the Minister of Finance has stated, and as we've stated, the recovery is underway. The unemployment benefits provided by the government have been an effective stopgap measure, but cannot be seen as sustainable in the long term. We must get our people back to work, and once working, promote the activity and growth that will keep them working. That is the reason that this budget contains significant stimulus to ensure that Bermudians can get back to work. A bright spot certainly is the resilience of our international business sector, which actually saw an incremental increase in the number of jobs. This demonstrates the importance of this sector to our local economy. But what cannot be understated is the government's commitment and work since it was elected to strengthen the IB sector and how that forms a key element of our approach to international engagement and to local governance. So these things don't happen by accident. They happen due to sound policy work that happens from the government of Bermuda. And our efforts in economic diversification, our efforts in making sure that our international standings are maintained is the type of things that lead to a growth in international business, which we have seen over this past year, despite the negative economic headwinds. Moving on to tourism. There is growth to celebrate in tourism, as we are now only months away from the opening of a genuine luxury product in the St. Regis. I congratulate the development team for making things work in such trying economic circumstances. Additionally, with a $10 million guarantee to support it, the Bermudiana Beach, a Hilton property, will commence final renovations this month with a view for opening to paying guests later this year. Both of these developments will provide much needed employment, in the case of the St. Regis property, ongoing hotel employment, and in the case of the Bermuda Beach property, construction jobs and then ongoing hotel employment, and will help to start the tourism recovery and also buttress the loss of the Fairmont Southampton Princess as that project moves forward to renovation. I'm excited by the work that is taking place at the Bermuda Tourism Authority under the leadership of the new Bermuda Tourism Authority Chair, MP Wayne Keynes, and the hard work of the team under interim CEO Glenn Jones. There were a number of successes in 2020 when many people said our entire tourism season would be written off. And I am certain that this budget will enable us to build on those successes. There is a core function to the Bermuda Tourism Authority that can and will be appropriately funded. The pent-up demand for leisure travel must be met with innovative sales and marketing strategies that pivot on Bermuda's safety, growing success in vaccinating the population, and ongoing COVID preparedness. We will also differentiate ourselves in the tourism market by adding our hotel workers to Phase 2 priority vaccinations to further support our tourism recovery. Moving to the budget for the Cabinet Office. Trying times force us to prioritize. All ministers, their permanent secretaries, and heads of departments worked incredibly hard to meet the expenditure targets set by the Minister of Finance, but did so determined to meet the needs of the people and to deliver on the promises that we made. The reduction in the Cabinet Office's allocation year over year is a direct reflection of that exercise. We reduced our allocation to support priority programs in areas like health, education, and social development and seniors. But even with those reductions, the Cabinet Office will facilitate continued capital grants for community clubs to enhance these local institutions while providing jobs, the development of a shoreside facility in support of the local fishing industry, which we've spoken about, and capital fund allocations have been made in this budget for that, investments in IT security to enhance the integrity of the government's information technology network, and additional information technology investments to continue the pace of rolling out online services to the people of Bermuda, of which we've seen significant progress this past year. Additionally, the budget has a fully funded Department of Economic Development to lead the internal effort of business development and economic diversification, which is critical to the work of which we must do if we business via the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation is also found in this budget. There will be no doubt an opportunity to expand on the Cabinet Office programs as part of the budget debate, but the broad scope of the work to be done during this fiscal year will make for a busy time committed to economic recovery for Bermuda. As the Minister responsible for public service, I wish to reiterate comments I made prior to the budget statement, and which were echoed by the Minister of Finance in his presentation to the House of Assembly on Friday. Public officers have been doing more with less for the better part of a decade. The pandemic magnified that and added to the stresses of all of us who work on behalf of the people of Bermuda. I cannot thank the women and men of the public service enough who have gone above and beyond the call of duty across the breadth of government to keep Bermuda safe. The new fiscal year will be challenging, and we will be relying on those same people to play a part in building on the foundation laid for economic recovery. I look forward to continuing to work with them and on behalf of the people we serve. Yesterday afternoon, the Minister of Finance and I met with union leaders and to thank them for the sacrifice of their members, but also to receive feedback on this year's budget so that as we move forward together, we can be aligned with our most valued partners with the Governor of Bermuda, and those are the employees who deliver services every day for the people of this country. With that, I'm happy to take questions from members of the media on the Minister of Finance and my presentation today.
Minister, Premier, good afternoon. Minister, if I could start with you. In today's paper, Craig Simmons, the economics lecturer, said that young entrepreneurs can be the driving force for the economy. Do you agree with that?
I've seen this morning's paper, but I haven't had a chance to read it. I was busy this morning attending to the Chamber of Commerce's breakfast.
But how?
But what I would say is this. I do believe that small and medium-sized businesses are the lifeblood of any economy. And inasmuch as entrepreneurs are the ones who typically start small and medium-sized businesses, they are critical to any kind of recovery that happens. And so I, without having seen the article, agree with the concept that entrepreneurs are very important to any kind of forward momentum with economies.
Right. And how important do you think it is for government to create the environment for them? Do you think government's doing enough?
I think it is very important for governments to work to create the environment. At the end of the day, what we would like to do is create the environment and then get out of the way. And so if there are opportunities for, listen, I think we always can do better. And if there are constructive suggestions on how we can enable people to be more successful, to create more of an environment that people can be successful in, let us know so we can kind of go about making the changes to affect that.
Do you think the banks can play a role? Mr. Simmons said that they're in a very good position at the moment. Would you agree with that?
Well, banks are the single largest source of capital for relatively priced capital for an economy. We don't have a central bank, and so the banks are de facto the capital sources here, and so of course they can play a part. They can play a part in a number of different ways. One is in terms of advice. because they see more of these things, clients coming across their doors looking for funding with ideas. They can give advice around structuring, focus the business plan, but they also can give support in terms of pricing of their credit products.
Now, you talked about a reduced expenditure in the next year. Do you think you're going to be able to stay within spending levels in the next year? Is a minister's going to be coming to you saying, look, we need more cash? Are you just going to have to give a straight no? Do you think you'll be able to do that? Or how tough is that going to be?
I think if you poll my cabinet colleagues, the toughness, difficulty of me saying no, it's not very hard at all.
Okay. No new taxes this year, but there must be some coming in the pipelines sometime soon. Have you you set up the tax commission or reformed the tax commission recently? When do you expect to hear back from them? When do you think it might be later on this year, this fiscal year, or not at least until 22, 23?
Well, those are two questions. And the first one, taxes for this year. There are going to be no new taxes this year. Mm-hmm. We are budgeting with a very, very careful eye on how the economy is performing. I've said publicly before that I view introducing any new tax at this point as effectively being another set of brakes on the economy. We already have the pandemic, which is the mother of all brakes, and so I don't want to make things any worse. We'll see how the economy performs, in as much as if there's scope next year, we'll give it some consideration, but I'm not going to get ahead of myself at this point. Okay. With respect to the Tax Reform Commission, I've yet to impanel the commission. I am giving thoughtful consideration to governance in terms of reference. I will be, at some point in the coming weeks, announcing the composition of the Tax Reform Commission, but I'm still working on it.
Okay. What efforts are being made to recover the 100 million in unpaid taxes?
I can report that last year I mentioned in my featured very prominently in my budget statement that we needed to do something about the uncollected taxes. What has happened over the course of the last year is there is a team that sits inside of the Tax Commissioner's organization responsible for collections. That team over the course of the last year has been enhanced with the addition of 2 external vendors to support collecting the taxes. Both of them have been hired on a success base, so in as much as they can collect, then they get paid a contingency. And so we are making some efforts. I'm waiting for more up-to-date data on how much success they've had over the course of the last several months, but we are focused on it. And I would say this, we have been living through a pandemic for the last 12 months, and so we are trying to balance the need to get our money back with the reality that a number of people have been adversely affected by the pandemic, and so they may not be able to pay. So we're just trying to be mindful of how we do this.
Right. Now, Cole Simons has said that the budget was silent on unfunded liabilities for the Public Service Superannuation Fund, health insurance for government employees, and the pension fund for ministers and members of the legislature. Why was that?
He must have had his prepared remarks written before the minister gave his speech, because I can refer to pages, so it's clearly not silent. So maybe the opposition leader wants to listen to the speech first before he makes his comments. Sorry, Minister.
Well, thank you for that. What I would say is that's interesting feedback, because this morning I was commended by Arthur Whiteman, who moderated this morning's Chamber of Commerce breakfast, for being very transparent and speaking very, very candidly about the underfunded nature of some of our pension funds. Right. Listen, I've been in the legislature for almost 3 years. This issue has been one that has been around for decades. I think that MP Simons has been around, so he would be more familiar with the issues than I would be, notwithstanding where I currently sit.
Okay, thank you. Now, you also met with the unions this morning, and on Friday you announced that the 10% pay cut wouldn't be extended into the next fiscal year. Do you think you're going to be able to stick with that, or can you see it? You might have to reintroduce it at some point further down the line.
Listen, I think we met with the unions yesterday, and I think what the takeaway from the meeting was this: we have the mother of all economic crises to work our way through. And the way we're going to do this successfully is through broad-based collaboration between all stakeholders. The unions are a very important stakeholder, as is the business community and the government. And so I foresee that we're going to be working together because no one wants to see the government get in any trouble. We all want to see us get this challenge fixed. And my suspicion is that the unions will continue to work with us constructively as they have done previously. And so part of our outreach to them is to promote transparency, to be very honest with them, to hear their feedback, and then to process it, and then to come up with solutions collaboratively that can actually make sense for all of us.
Okay. And one final question, Minister. In January, in your pre-budget statement, you said you were looking at early retirement for civil servants. There was no mention of it in the budget. Is that now off the table?
No, we're still looking at it. So part of the analysis that was done for me indicated that all the people who were eligible to for early retirement, had they accepted it, would cost me about $98 million. Right. And so what we're trying to do is figure out what the ideal way of implementing something like this would be. And at the end of the day, obviously, it is dependent on the people who would fall within the qualifying criteria to decide if they want to or not.
Right.
And the key points in that, Gareth, lest it be manipulated in some way, it is voluntary early retirement. It is not forced and mandatory early retirement.
Okay.
As whenever the words early retirement are put forward, alarm bells go off.
Sure. Okay, thanks so much, Minister.
Sure.
Premier, just a few questions for you. Expanding the resident population is one of the 6 priority initiatives in the budget. Can we expect any immigration reform soon?
You've heard from the Minister of Labor on a number of matters when it's dealing with immigration reform. This government, rather than going about immigration reform in a divisive manner, which causes challenges, we held true to our 2017 election pledge, as where we said that we were going to approach these matters on a bipartisan basis. And notwithstanding the decision from the One Bermuda Alliance to remove themselves from the bipartisan nature of our bipartisan immigration reform matters, we're still going to press ahead, and we're going to do it in a collaborative fashion. I've given numerous speeches, both to the Progressive Labor Party delegates conference in the country regarding the situation in immigration. Our challenges come from the fact that immigration was not viewed as a tool of economic development, but was used as a weapon for political power. Those are the facts. That is the history of Bermuda, and we must recognize that history and move to a different place. This government has laid out its plans. We are progressing our plans. We will continue to consult with our plans and advance those plans. So there was a conversation yesterday where an individual, an MP, was out on the doorstep, and he was speaking to one of his constituents, and one of his constituents were speaking about their granddaughter who did not have Bermudian status, and that MP was able to relate to that person that we fixed that problem. So there is the immigration reform measures that have taken place. We are addressing the issue. The Minister of Labor will continue to address the issue, but the things that have been laid out in the Minister's budget statement are no different than what our statements have been in 2017, our election manifesto, or if you want to go back to 2015, to the budget replies when the Progressive Labor Party were in opposition, where we said that we must increase our residential population. That's not a question. The question is how do you do it and the way that you strike the right balance to ensure that Bermudians are not disenfranchised. We know that we can do both, and that is what this government will do.
Okay, thank you. Is there any update on Caroline Bay? There's reports of it being sold, a possible sale.
So can you repeat the question?
On Caroline Bay?
Sure.
Statement.
So you will be aware that we commenced a court action. We went to petition the courts for the appointment of joint provisional liquidators.
Right.
JPLs were appointed. They are in the process of making assessments. They have prepared marketing materials and are fielding offers from interested parties. And they expect to wrap their process up in the coming weeks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Minister.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Just about those unfunded liabilities, because that's you're right. Every year you hear about it. It's gone on for decades. and every year I hear someone say exactly what you said. You know, it's a long-standing problem. It seems like we kick it down the road every year. Isn't it about time somebody actually figured out a way of resolving that issue? Isn't now the best time to do that?
So without being glib, David, I'll say this. I retained McKinsey and Company back in August of last year to come in to do a piece of work on our unfunded liability situation with the 3 pension funds. The scope of their work is fairly significant. The first phase of it was to do an assessment of the problem. That work has been completed. The next phase is interacting with stakeholders. The reason why McKinsey was retained in the first place is because they have a very rich track record of working with underfunded pension plans and bringing some resolution to their underfunded status. This work is usually involved working with governments, unions, employees, and other key stakeholders around developing solutions to the problem. And so there have been, quite quietly over the course of the last several weeks, conversations that have been going on, mostly via video conference with McKinsey, the Public Funds Investment Committee, and key stakeholders as we're talking through the challenges. So we are actively working on it. One of the things that I have not been doing is running around and championing it or shouting from the rooftops, we're doing this, we're doing that. We're doing the work. It's important work. It's work that's not trivial, and it's work that needs to have the broad buy-in from the folks who are part of the outcome. There are 4 things that we're looking at. One is in terms of solutions, and they're fairly standard. One is retirement age. Levers that we have to play with. And so the conversations that are going on now is one, to ensure that people have a common set of facts, understand what the nature of the problem is, and then understand what the potential remedies are if we start playing around with each of the four levers. So the work is going on, and we're not talking about it anymore. We're actually doing something about it.
That's great. Are you able to quantify the size of the problem if nothing was done about it? If you, like everybody in the past, it just kicks it down the road again?
The numbers, David, are a function of actuarial calculations. So it depends on the population's age, the workforce's age, contemplated retirement, those folks coming in behind them, because as older folks retire, younger folks contribute, and they help to kind of partially fund. The last number I believe that was published was about $1.5 billion as it related to the PSSF. The CPF is a different number. I can get that to you offline.
Okay, that's great. I was reading through the reports. I could not find a copy of the estimates of expenditure and revenue for this.
From the House of Assembly.
Were they available at the House?
They are available now.
Ah, they are now.
Yes.
Very nice. Thank you very much. Was there a holdup? Was there a problem? Was a printing problem or?
I will say, David, that this year, as I said before, was a particularly challenging year. One, because of COVID, but two, because we lost FS Manders.
Right.
And I didn't fully appreciate the extent of his involvement in this process. This is my 3rd budget. I would dare say that the first 2 were fairly easy cakewalks. This year, without him, there was a big hill to climb. Luckily, the team stepped up. But in this environment where people are working remotely, it has presented an additional challenge, and so we were able to get the books published for distribution this morning.
That's great. The state of unemployment in the. I was reading. It said the last unemployment rate was 3.8%. I think it was November 2019. Was it? Is there a more up-to-date figure? I mean, the Premier mentioned the people who were displaced.
So just to help you out, David, those things are done when the labor force survey is done. Labor force surveys, as you would know, are not done every year. I don't know the next time that we're going to do a labor force survey. There may be a need to do one. Of course, the function of unemployment is a function of people who are looking for work versus individuals who are, in work themselves. So we'll certainly update that figure. It was certainly a move in the positive direction in 2019. We would have seen, unfortunately, that 2020, certainly there was a slide back, and there could be some extrapolation done, but updated actual figures of unemployment will not be available at this time. But I can inquire as to the time when statistics will be looking to do another labor force survey. And it might make sense to do one this year, but of course that would have to be budgeted for. Because that requires staff and things, and if it's not inside the regular work plan. Although this year might be a census year, and typically you don't have to do labor force surveys in the years of which you do census because you can capture that information at the same time as you're collecting the census.
Okay. One of the other things that I was looking at was, because over the last couple of years, I kept wondering how much was being done about the environment. It used to be a big issue. We hear hardly anything about it anymore. Is there much that could be done about protecting Bermuda's natural resources?
I'm going to speak to that.
Sure.
From speaking to protecting Bermuda's natural resources, when we talk about the stimulus project that has been put in place and other things, we've seen even additional money that's been put into foreshore protection. We know that there's money that's being funded this year to commence the redevelopment of the Tynes Bay Waste Energy Facility. When we're talking about the environment, one of the challenges of which we have in Bermuda, of course, is sewage. This budget has funding West End, not East End, water and sewage treatment in the East End, and it's a broader plan for water and sewage treatment for the rest of the country. So I think on those measures of when we're talking about those core measures of the environment, there's certainly funding inside of this budget to deal and tackle those issues. Additionally, when we're talking about the green economy and items, the minister has outlined that he'll be speaking more about the economic recovery plan in future weeks. But part of the big focus on that is about making sure that we make investments in green energy and green technology. One of the things that can be seen is that the government said that we were going to put solar panels on government buildings. We did fund that as part of the stimulus measures that the Minister of Finance had previously announced. That work will be completed before the end of this fiscal year. There's additional work that's going to be taking place at other places like the National Sports Center and others where we're looking to expand that to schools, and also when talking about infrastructure for electric vehicles and electric charging of vehicles. So I think you'll see a lot of things that are coming forward on the matters of the green economy. I know the minister might also add where we're going to tie that in to our future economic development activities when it comes to climate risk.
I was thinking more about the protection of land, though. Land that seems to be coming under increasing development. That's what I was thinking of. More like, it seems like there have been several really green areas that are disappearing under the plow. There used to be an attempt to stop people from developing arable land.
I would ask you to be very specific on that, because the only thing that I know under my tenure as leader of this country has been the addition of stock to protected land with the Riddles Bay proposals and development. So you would have to be specific in where you're seeing arable land being transformed into construction sites, because those protections are still in place.
Actually, there is a list, and I will bring it to you.
Feel free.
Yes, I'll bring it to you. The other thing is, I just wondered if there was any future development plans. I mean, you mentioned the East End. I assume that is the sewage treatment plant, and is going to be similar to what was done at the West End. Yes. And so is that also something that should be done in Hamilton? So for Hamilton, because, sorry, go ahead.
The answer to your question is yes. That was part of the matters of which I was outlining. And one of the things, I hate to go back to talking about what we spoke about when we were in opposition, but in 2015 in our budget reply, we spoke about the need to lay the foundation for infrastructure for the growth of Bermuda's population, and to speak about how you can grow it responsibly by making sure that you create more of a living city in the city of Hamilton. But in order to do that, you have to have good water and you have to have good sewage treatment. The cabinet had a presentation last week. The team at the Ministry of Public Works has been looking at an overall development plan for the rebuild or the renovation of Tynes Bay. It is going to be a very innovative plan. We're not going to speak about it as this budget is funding the preliminary work to make sure that we can see how that can actually work and be funded through the government. But if you look to our 2020 election manifesto, the upgrade of Bermuda's water and sewage infrastructure featured prominently there. And to answer your question very succinctly,
it's interesting, you spent all that time with the Chamber of Commerce, and you mentioned them a couple of times today, your meeting. They had a statement out which, in fact, talked about the fact that they felt that the shrinking population in Bermuda should lead to a shrinking budget or shrinking cost of government. And of course, we hear this all the time, that people believe that the government is too big, too expensive. And so I wondered if government, and I think also, I believe one of their biggest expenditures is employment costs. I mean, I think for every dollar, it's like 45 to 50 cents, right? So what I'm wondering is, how can we tackle that expensive cost in the future?
Well, I think the Premier, in his remarks about the ministries for which he's responsible, talked about the digital technology initiatives that are underway, or will be underway in the forthcoming fiscal year. That's one piece of the solution. The other piece of the solution is to grow this economy. Because obviously, if people are displaced because the government's becoming more efficient, they're going to need some place to go and work. Otherwise, we end up finding that we're supporting people through all kinds of social programs. And so, I have been doing this is now my third budget, and I hear that refrain quite a bit. And I always ask the question, what happens next? Now, I've spent most of my career working in the private sector, and I've seen quite interesting practices when employers decide to reduce their workforces. Their employees are given an envelope and wished well. And then they become ostensibly the government's problem. And so I'm fine with thinking about how do we make government work better for people. But at the end of the day, the way that we fix this problem is to grow the economy, because we need people working, and people who will be displaced from one job need to have another job to go into. So that puts more pressure on us around recovery, expanding the number of jobs in the economy, and upskilling people in terms of their skills. And so the real solution is grow. And I think the Chamber's comments may be a function of the shrinkage that may have happened. So relatively speaking, the government is a larger piece of the pie. All of us, I think, would like to see the private sector thriving a whole lot more, creating more employment opportunities. And so inasmuch as we are investing in technology, making government work better, and there are opportunities that are being created in the private sector, I think it's a win-win.
Okay, I think I'm being
Thank you, David.
dragged back by the handler here, so I'll step back. But thank you, gentlemen.
You're welcome.
Thank you, members of the media.
That's it.
Anything else?
All right, well, in closing, I'd just like to echo the Minister of Finance's thoughts and comments on the thanks to his technical officers. I'd like to extend my personal thanks to him for the work of certainly which he's doing. He followed after me as Minister of Finance, and he's had 3 tough budgets to deliver, but each and every single time he's managed to do them with the grace and dignity of which the office of Minister of Finance deserves. So, Minister, thank you very much for your excellent work on this.
Thank you.
Absolutely. We will be with you again tomorrow. There'll be more ministers that will be giving press conferences tomorrow, in addition to at 5:45 tomorrow evening, where I'll be back here for a COVID update with the Minister of Health. Thank you all very much and have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Today.